Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's panel on women entrepreneurship in India on the occasion of Women's International Day. Today, we have eminent and very successful women entrepreneurs joining us and talking a little bit more about the state of women entrepreneurs in India. Are they enough? Do we need to do more? And what do we need to get a very vibrant ecosystem rolling? At this point in time, I would like to welcome all my co-panelists to this discussion. We have with us today Deena Jacob, who is from Open Technologies, or Bank Open, as you might know that better. Hi, Deena.
Hi, Anuradha.
We have Shinjini Kumar, who is a new entrepreneur with Salt, a financial health tool for women. Hey, Shinjini. We have Shruti from ApnaKlub, who is helping retailers in tier 2 and tier 3 cities in India actually help build up efficiency and build up their revenues. Hi, Shruti.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Priya Sharma from Zest, which is India's leading BNPL provider, who is joining us from Bangalore. Hi, Priya.
Hi, everyone.
So to begin with, shall we start with, some of the recent initiatives that have happened in India? There seem to be several women-focused funds. You have enough, we have enough VCs in the ecosystem. We have very successful entrepreneurs like yourself. We've had Falguni take Nykaa public and build actually credibility both for the digital commerce system as well as for women entrepreneurs in India. And you have actually several venture capital firms also start out initiatives which are specifically focused on women entrepreneurship. There is Sequoia Spark, there is Kalari's Ventures actually starting an effort. So there are many such efforts. Does this all seem like this is the best time for women entrepreneurs in India to you? Let me start actually in the order that I introduced you. Deena, would you like to kick off the conversation?
Sure, Anuradha. Thanks a lot for having me in the panel, and hello, everyone. So this is a very relevant question for the day right now. So if you see women entrepreneurship, one good thing is that I would say there is hope. There are things are coming together for women to become successful, and people are taking women seriously, unlike the previous times. But is it enough? I would say that it is not yet a time for us to celebrate that we have seen a change in the way it has. So the reason why I'm telling you is right from the way in which the society views you, and though we have multiple women-focused funds, as you say, or probably women-focused programs, the shortcoming also is that it is not yet at a complete society-driven maturity stage, wherein when somebody decides to, as a woman, when you decide to step into entrepreneurship, or when you decide to actually pursue that path, there is still things around probably the stage of life you are in, or probably the things that you can for yourself achieve, considering the responsibilities also you handle. All of those color. I mean, are we seeing women beyond this color? I don't think we have, as a system, as an ecosystem, in every part we have matured into what is desirable completely. So I would say that women still operate within challenging environment, but good part is that we have so many people who are setting an example in terms of this. We can break these stereotypes, and also women by nature are more resilient in what they do, and more in terms of perseverance is a kind of art, or rather a DNA that women possess in terms of the way they are. So that is something which, as we can see a sea change in terms of the way in which it is being perceived, women are being perceived, that is there. However, if you ask whether it is to the level of maturity, I would say that there is still a long way to go, which has to be contributed by setting examples, which each one of us can do, by helping each other, which again is something in our hand, and by actually, giving the society this strong message that if we set our heart on something without excuses, we are in a position to do multitasking and get it there. We are like natural problem solvers. So that would be what my take is on the situation right now.
So from Deena, your perspective, it is actually, like that women are prepared, and the perception that women do not make good entrepreneurs is actually like, like receding, right? It is much more about like, like everybody says, okay, we welcome women as entrepreneurs, but nevertheless, you're required to do many things at home. You're required to do other things which are expected of you. And then you're also expected to be a 24/7 entrepreneur. And that by itself is a very tough task and can challenge, stroke, daunt many people as such, right? So the attitudes in those kind of situations, the support system that a woman needs actually needs to change. That's actually like what you have started out the conversation with. Great point. Shruti, you were actually like of the opinion that, like the supply of women in entrepreneurship or talent, women talent in the startup ecosystem is still very low. Would you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I think Anuradha, right, from the input or the pipeline from which like most people come into entrepreneurship in India, which tends to be engineering or tends to be, a STEM subject, we have very low participation of women in the study force, like to start with. And then as the years keep going on, what we are seeing in India is that women are leaving the workforce, and they're leaving the workforce in greater numbers than like, kind of equivalent countries also. And I think that's a real problem, because it doesn't matter how many, like kind of like middle of the funnel or end of the funnel activities you want to do if the top of the funnel is kind of like, empty. So one, just kind of including more people into the conversation about how do you encourage people in colleges, how do you encourage like non-STEM people to start up. I think that's a beginning. And there needs to be a cultural change, right? So in the USA, right, there's this whole concept of girl boss, and just like celebrating kind of like the idea of like women entrepreneurs in a very meaningful way. So as Deena also mentioned, right, you need to have people rooting for you. You need to be, you need to have like support from people saying it's okay to not get married early. It's okay to not have children. It's okay to have children, to be pregnant, and to be an entrepreneur. So you need kind of like that full range of choices to be available to you. And that's a cultural moment. And that's a cultural moment that I think is starting to come to India, but it's not here yet. And so that's what I see quite often like missing, right? There aren't enough women in the pipelines. There aren't enough women interested in like these careers. There aren't enough women interested in taking these risks. And that reflects in the number of people going out to VCs and, asking for funding also.
So Priya, as like one of the early entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, especially in the fintech ecosystem, right? You and Lizzie, two women entrepreneurs with Ashish, actually like started off on Zest. We've actually like come a long way from there. But when you started off, what were your experiences? How were you perceived? What did you feel?
Yes, absolutely. So I think we, as you mentioned, we started early. So we were fundraising around middle of 2015. I think in general, I feel that in 2015, our fundraising was actually relatively easy. We were and if I compare to compared to today, I would say 2015 definitely feels very easy, in hindsight. And I think we were very well received. We were, welcomed by ON and a few others. So I think the initial starting up was relatively easy, more because I think in our case, we were one of the earliest fintechs in India. And we had prior experience in fintech, the three co-founders. So even the fact that, we were two women co-founders and one male co-founder, I don't think that was that held us back in the earlier days. I do feel that in general, if your idea is good enough and you have merit and you have the relevant experience to back you, then I think there are funding opportunities that are available. But yes, as we have gone along in our journey, and as we have grown, and as fintech in general, and especially in 2021, I would say that was almost the banner year. If you read, the FT, which is the investment bank, they said put out this report saying 2021 was the banner year for fintech. If you then consider how many fintech companies are today that are run by female-led founders or female entrepreneurs, and then what is the funding that was received by those companies. And even if you looked at the overall startup ecosystem in 2021, it was a bumper year, massive funding rounds happened. And we only have two names to talk about. Even in the IPO scenario, in the US, there is Bumble, and in India, there is Nykaa, right? So while there has been so much funding that happened in 2021, I think that somewhere maybe female-led companies or entrepreneurs, maybe they were a little bit left behind or did not receive as much attention, barring, one or two. So in general, I feel that the glass is half full, I would say. We are still very much early in our journey. I think that starting up is almost the first step for any entrepreneur to take, and there is funding available. But then the road, going forward and getting the initial funding might become easy. And while there are specific female-focused funds coming up in India, as well as there have been a few that have been around abroad as well. But yes, I do think that we should also think about how the road looks, 4-5 years onwards, and what are the specific biases or issues that one might have to go through. But yeah, I do remain an optimist, and I feel that, to answer your original point, that yes, I think our original funding was relatively easy, and then subsequently as well, we have managed to get funding and we have managed to build our business. And if I look at it that way, then yes, we have had a good run as well.
Shinjini, you're a part of an all-female founder kind of a team, the newest kid on the block as well, as far as this group is concerned. How was you when you were thinking about it? Did you actually specifically want to be this way, as in, like a female entrepreneur team actually looking at products for women as such? Did you believe in that story? Is that how you actually set yourself up? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, very much. Short answer. We were looking to solve a problem that's a relatively, entrenched problem, because financial services has been around for a very long time, but for various reasons, it has not really included women. Now, even though the reality of women's education or participation or managing, money may have changed at the micro level, at the formal financial services level, that continues to be laggard as far as women are concerned. What was really causing us a lot of angst, that is to all the three co-founders, and that's the point on which we came together, was this disturbing fact that those traditional biases are somehow also getting coded into the new tech environment, which means, by that I mean that if traditional finance excluded women for a certain type of bias about not holding assets or not holding property or whatever, when we were building the new fintech ecosystems, we were not seeing that was actually taking that problem and dealing with it in a very different way, because the gendered lens was not something which was being applied. So we didn't, not that we started with credit, we started with a very open mind about saying, okay, let's just look at it and see what's the real issue. What is it that's causing this break in because women are consumers, right? So why would you not look at them? So we did think that between the three of us, and it was not only because we were women, but we were women, and also we were women from backgrounds where we felt that us coming together could actually give it a perspective that would work. So that's what brought us together. I want to say something, Anuradha, to your previous question, which is to say, while the ecosystem is changing, the fundamental fact that not more than a handful of women become visible as women entrepreneurs, that continues, this invisible woman thing continues to apply in every field wherever women move out of that care and consumer economy. So as far as women in caregiver roles or consumption roles are concerned, that tends to get highlighted, in media or in every other way. But when it comes to women as entrepreneurs or tough people or survivors, those are not stories that create the main narrative. So when I look at a lot of tier 2 India, and, I do these long road trips and I meet a lot of people and I do a fair bit of that personally. I'm always very struck by entrepreneurship that does not really get recognized as much, because we are obviously, for good reasons, talking about, building companies and startups and funding, because scale is important, because that also puts that, that brings you into that mainstream narrative. But if you see a lot of these women who are taking up entrepreneurship at their levels, whether it is in food or fashion or local problem solving at the local levels. That's a very encouraging story as well. Not the story of large capital participation, but the story of a lot of grit and determination from a lot of women. And that gives me sort of hope that this thing will actually eventually become better.
When that's that, like all of you have made like great points. One is societal agreement, encouragement, or like at least like not getting in the way of women being successful. And then there is this supply side part of it where, like right from the time that you're young, it is never in your head that you have this ability to become somebody who's a leader, who's an entrepreneur. The point that, like Priya and Shinjini are making about like, like women, entrepreneurs are actually like becoming more in fintech. Actually, women participation is high, but it is not equally representative when you look at like the larger pipeline of unicorns and the more successful kind of enterprises. And the fact that, like entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily have to be this funded, like capital oriented entrepreneurship. It could be actually like local level participation as well. But unless and until you call it out and you're saying that, like it is almost normal for women to be entrepreneurs, this is not going to become as mainstream a topic that we're really thinking of. That's actually like what I'm hearing. So all these are great points. So what does it take for this to become normal? Because from, like if we look at it, all of us are around this table. There was like also, like there are a few others in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, in the fintech ecosystem. There are also other women who are actually like successful. There are successful women leaders, and there have been women leaders of IT companies as well, really large enterprises. There are people who are actually like heading global enterprises these days who are also women. So it is not as though it is like, like, or do you still think that is something which is being called out as special and it is not normalized? I think like in 2009, perhaps, we were having this conversation about like, like entrepreneurs, generally being an entrepreneur not being a good career for guys, right? Like, so, and today we are talking about women entrepreneurship in this, so where do you think this conversation is breaking down, not being normal? Where do you think that is like, where we are saying that this is something which needs to be called out? This needs actually special support and special attention. Maybe can I start with you, Shruti, when you made this point about like, like in colleges, why don't we have this dialogue? Why do you think that is so?
I think, Anuradha, I want to just talk about this incident that happened on national television on this show called Shark Tank. There was like a two women team that came up with like some, with an idea for a pickle company. And one of the feedbacks that they got was, why don't you put like your IITian son at the front of it, right? This is like a well-known entrepreneur and it comes from this ecosystem. I think that thinking lurks at the background of everyone's mind. Why don't you put the more bankable person at the front of it? And to a lot of people, women somehow, they're not very comfortable working directly with the women. They don't feel like, that they can sit down and have a direct conversation. They can't invite, like them to like poker parties. I think like there's a little bit of that, like feeling that resides in some corners of this ecosystem, which is why I think like, like movements like Spark or movements like, what Vani Kola is doing with Kalari, they're like really important. And Falguni, her success, it's just like super, inspiring. But just like, entrepreneurship became like a real thing after, Sachin Bansal and Binny Bansal made it big. I think like, like the fact that she made it big, she is economically successful. She's so well covered everywhere. We're starting to see other women like kind of follow that path and like to believe in themselves, right? I think just like entrepreneurs pulled all entrepreneurs out of like the woodwork, I think female entrepreneur role models will pull them out. The problem is there are like deep, like, like mindsets against like, like women being in controlling positions. And to be an entrepreneur is to be in a very controlling position, right? You're literally creating this idea from scratch. And I think that is where I feel like that cultural moment needs to happen. In colleges, people need to go and like, kind of like share their stories. I think women need to be encouraged to reach out to like other mentors, not just to women mentors, but to other mentors and figure out how do they build their story. And I know that in colleges, we do not have the same kind of cultural mentorship available to us, right? We don't have this like bank of people that we can call upon as easily. It's not considered, as easy to talk to a woman as it is to talk to a man. And that was the fallout of Me Too also, right? In some ways, people were like, oh, this is why I don't mentor women. So I think like a lot of those things, as they keep going away, and as women discover the economic like power and independence that comes from this, it will resolve. But that to me is the major issue, right? Like the fact that you're not told from the beginning, these are the steps to success. This is how you find a mentor. This is how you build a relationship. And mentors finding it doubly hard to actually form that relationship with women.
So, so there are cultural attitudes, and I think like Deena, you also alluded to this earlier on in terms of like, how people are, like, while there isn't a no, there isn't a yes, a thumping yes yet. Right. And you also work along with startups in terms of like, from Bank Open platform as well. What is your thinking? Is there a change? Is there something which needs to be done specifically? When you think about like, so Shruti said that, like mentorship, or like at least a little bit of an organized way of mentoring people, right? Like, and calling out, for example, that there is something like this, like here's a way of you to reach out to people, etc. So that's one thing. What other things would you think of, Deena?
So, see, I'll take it in 2-3 different ways. What I have seen from, open side also, you're right, we work with a lot of SMEs, and then we have seen what's happening with the people that are here. We have a 50-member team, and some of the, majority were women, and good part is that almost 70% of our, 60 to 70% of our senior leadership is also, constitutes of women. And what we have also found is that this is nothing that we have consciously done, but in terms of skills, and when you give them the opportunity, the way they come ahead, it's organically happened for us. But at the same time, there are certain spots wherein we do have, especially when we have scaling up tech, and Shinjini also mentioned about it. These are the areas where we've struggled in terms of having that balance, and we always go by the balance part of it. However, that being said, I think in the last, for this whole thing of when we talk about the supply of women in either the leadership layer or in the entrepreneurial side as well, this, if you see, there is a root cause for how this shift is happening. And that's exactly the reason why I'm excited about the times we are in. Because if you look at it, there was also this mentoring, the societal, all of those aspects which made it difficult for women to consistently perform, or rather consistently have a career graph, or be it on the entrepreneurial side. The limitations in terms of, this is where I mentioned about the age stage, all of that, right? Which cut off some of those consistency. And that is extremely critical. And most of the time, this also becomes a hindrance for you to get back to work, or get back to leadership, get back to, emerging beyond a point, because you are, at times you are forced to take a break from what you have been like consistently pushing towards. Because that was one of the reason, in terms of mindset, ecosystem, or rather the support that you are getting from the entire societal perspective, right? Even today, a woman, when you talk about it, is supposed to take the entire responsibility of, be it family, be it the break on having a kid. So how many times we have thought of, or this is where I would also talk about the mentorship as such. So unless we give them, or rather, right before you get into a career path, or right before you get into entrepreneurship, or whatever you want to take up in terms of your future in your in life, women needs, right, as Shinjini mentioned also, women needs mentorship in terms of how to conduct yourself amidst all that is happening, all the chaos in the society, or rather all the expectations which are actually painted upon you. So how to manage that, how to handle, and also to take a conscious decision wherein whether it is when it comes to break, when it comes to going into certain things, how you should consistently go about handling that. I think that's important. And to some extent, the kind of changes that we have seen probably 10 years, or probably in the last couple of decades, we have seen a kind of change in the entire society, consistently different programs that has been coming in, and lot many, at the grassroots level, right from the SME level to the entrepreneurship in the local way, which, the localized way, which Shinjini was mentioning about. I love that. So all of this is actually bearing fruit in the next 20 years. So now that we see, it's a little bit of the change, or the wave of change, which actually started off, the spark which started off probably a couple of decades back. that's when, this workforce is what we are seeing, or rather, entrepreneurs and women who are leaders who are coming in the next, 1 decade or a 1.5 decade. So if we have to see this happening in a major way, major shift happening, I'm sure in the next 5 years, because if you see the change that has happened in the last decade is much, much higher than what we have seen earlier. So in the next 5 years, these are going to be like, if we give the right mentorship and right, molding at the right source, we would see a lot of women coming into both into entrepreneurship and even into, not only the startup, but in the entire SME fabric also that we see. Because even in our base, we work with a lot of women SMEs we see. And that's very encouraging to note. I mean, in various space, I mean, right, with the rise of the D2C and with the rise of, all the, during the pandemic also, how many people are thinking about getting out and doing things on their own rather than, just waiting for opportunities to come and see them. And we can see various, I mean, women in various situations coming up and doing that. So I would say that these are all a result of last, so many decades, or probably half a decade, wherein there were much more focused, razor focused efforts on getting women into taking bold steps. And it was just that support and a push which was required, because most of the people had it in them. And once they have proved it, you don't have to, again, that whole gender bias goes off. And to give you exactly what Priya mentioned as well, right? Most of the time you feel if you make sense and if you have an idea, you have executed or rather demonstrated you can do that, there are mostly like, people see you without the gender lens for that matter. So there are like, enough areas. So it is not only women focused thing we require, we should empower them to go ahead and fight it out with anybody. I mean, irrespective of gender, it's your skill set, your smartness, your demonstration should take care. And for that, it has to be a good backing for everything for that matter. Don't force them to come out. Don't force them to have an hindrance. How do you back it up? So that is something which has to happen in future and probably, going forward. And with with the people we work together as well, I'm really surprised. Even, one would assume that a woman who would probably get a reasonably good mid-management job or something which they are, they have been educated and come into the system, they would be having financial independence. But to a surprise, we have seen people who doesn't even hold their debit card with them. I mean, they don't have control of their account. People who don't have wallets. I mean, how come? So that is where I'm talking about. It is not only the intent, but I think we need to put together everything in terms of, it's for all of us. I think it's a collective responsibility in terms of giving that push. And second is collective responsibility for each one of us not to take any of the gender-based excuses for something not to be delivered. So these are the two things. Again, talking about the Me Too, Shinjini touched upon that. So these are the things which has to converge for us to even go out and show their example to the next set of people who are coming. It can be done, and it can be done without any kind of screen.
Thank you. And so Shinjini, you have women actually like just touching upon the same thematic of empowering women. And you already mentioned that, like to a large extent, women are aware but not empowered in the sense that, like it might just be their own like holding back, right? Like it is not necessarily somebody else who's holding them back, but just that it's not what is expected of you, right? And you see that, and that is in some ways the financial journey of women. So it's women consumers for you in that context. So as you look at people, right, like in normal life situations, how are you thinking about what does it require for them to feel empowered?
Sure. So let me start this with something that we are talking about, which is, men always say that, oh yeah, women all cook all the time, but men are better chefs. And I always have a bone to pick on that, because I always say that, yeah, because chefs get paid and women cook at home for no salary. So what happens is that when women are very good entrepreneurs, because they are good at into something that Deena was talking about, right? We're a lot of intuitive thinking. You drive through small places, you'll find women selling stuff, taking care. I mean, I'm right now taking this call from Uttarakhand, and if you go out in the street right now, you'll barely find any man who is not drunk, and you'll find women doing all the work, right? So it's not that women are new to entrepreneurship or they don't understand the concept of money or what money can do for them, their families, their communities. I think it's all there. What ends up happening is it's all, and rather I'll just keep going back to this theme of saying that the moment payment comes in, capital comes in, money comes in, it immediately, I don't know what patriarchy has done so successfully to reset itself, that no matter which field it opens up, the moment capital floods into it, men flood into it. Okay. So entrepreneurship now is a man's preserve because there's big capital into it. Okay. So then what ends up, but I'll tell you what ends up happening with women, because I've seen this, I can only say this because I am my age and I've seen so many different things happening with women in different fields. It happens in education, it happens in science, it happens in government, it happens in boardrooms, and now it's happening in entrepreneurship. That when you start to see that once men have taken over, and I'm sorry to be saying this, I don't want to be men shaming or anything. There are very good men out there. I've had great mentors. But what ends up happening is that when the capital flows in and they set this discourse to become this very testosterone driven, like what old investment banking culture used to be, that you put your feet on the table when somebody walks into your room and you just use, you say bad things just to sound smart. When that culture begins to dominate, then women begin to withdraw because it's kind of distasteful. Like, do I really want to be that person? Do I really want to be that, that bad a person? So I think one of the things that prevents women from actually taking charge and scaling up is two things. One is, of course, as you all said, it's the cultural expectation. It's the fact that I have so much to do on the side of caregiving, take care of my house, take care of the children. If the man is, at least he's managing the money, let him do at least that much. One of my friends says, it's a blue collar job, let him just do it. But a lot of entrepreneurs actually fall victim to this because they delegate the money management part to, I know so many women who will build their brand, they will build their relationship, they will build their sales team, they will build everything, and they will leave the financial management to husband. And after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that becomes the basic problem, because now if the woman wants to expand or she wants to do something different, the key of the locker is with the man. And then he begins to assert decisions. And there goes entrepreneurship from your hand to the other hand. And I'm taking micro examples, but even at a macro stage, that tends to play up. And the solution to that, in my view, I always say that fear is the fear of not having enough information, right? It's dark. When you flash light on it, the fear goes away. I think one of the things, and the reason these conversations are important, is because when you put the light on it, you realize that it's really not that hard, or it's really not like all these women sitting here, they've broken through that. We think we'll break through that. We think we'll help many other women break through that. And it's important to understand that it's in some ways it's an unfounded fear, but yes, it does exist.
And Priya, now coming back to you, as women founders, and when you talk about hiring people, especially and given that the funnel of women are small, right? How did you find that impacting your team dynamics? How did you find that impacting your conversations with venture capitalists or with partners, for that matter, right? Like, how did that come about? What were your experiences there?
Yeah, I think all three we had, very interesting and different experience. So let me touch upon the team point. So even though we are, 2 women founders, so we are like 66% of our founder group, but at the management level, for example, we are only, I guess, 30%, and even at a company level, we only have 30% or less women. So I do think that it's not easy, even though we as women founders, we genuinely attract more women applicants to begin with, right? Because they see, they recognize that, Zest as a workplace is most likely to be very different from any other workplace. So it is, from our perspective, we have tried to create a very diverse workplace, not just from a gender perspective, but from mindset and inclusion perspective. So we obviously try our best to make it as inclusive as possible. But then, yes, definitely there is the supply problem, as Shruti mentioned. There aren't, especially in key areas such as tech and product, there just aren't enough women around. And in a, fintech or any tech, based startup, in general, 50% of your workforce is tech. So 50% of your workforce by definition has a very low representation of women. So we even, last year we were working with certain agencies that were trying to actually get women who had taken, how do I say, leave absence or had dropped out of the workforce, and because of the pandemic and flexible working and remote working, were considering coming back. So we were trying to actually proactively reach out to women who had dropped off because of commute issues and practical life pre-COVID, and we were trying to position this COVID time as a good way to get back women. But I would say we're making some inroads into it, but it's a long way to go. So I would say, yes, fundamentally, look, tech and product is a challenge. And me, myself, I come from a STEM background. I can tell you, in my engineering class, we were 13 girls in the whole college out of 350 boys, right? And this is your IITs. So that is where it starts from. So I think Shruti already talked about that. So on that, we are a long way to go. However, I do see that a lot of women are coming into marketing, in HR, in customer experience, in operations. So we are beginning to see a lot of women come in. But yeah, if we are unable to shift the proportion on tech and product, then I don't think we will be able to move the needle. So that's on the team piece. On the partnership piece, let me talk about that first, and then maybe talk about the investor piece in the last bit. So on the partnership piece has also been quite interesting, actually. And Zest is, about embedding finance, and therefore we are fundamentally a partnership driven business. We work with e-commerce or e-tailers or retailers on the one side, and on the other side, we work with banks and NBFCs. We do find that most of these are, the decision making is with men. 99%, especially on the banking side, the decision making is with men. I remember going and meeting Shinjini when she was at Citi. She was an exception. I think she and Lizzie and myself were the only 3 women in the room. There were mostly men. So it becomes actually quite challenging in some scenarios. I hate to say this, but when we were very, in our initial days, and when we had to get one of our first few banking partnerships live, we very quickly realized that, and we got the feeling that we were being laughed out of the room as 2 women entrepreneurs. We were pitching our idea. We wanted to work with, the financial institution as a partner, and, they were throwing IRR and, calculations at us, and they thought that we will not be able to understand it, and we will not be able to do structured finance or complex things and things like that. So we have faced those situations, and what we did in that scenario was we actually did build a team that was more diverse, if I can say that or put it that way. And even on the other side, our biz dev team that works with merchants, again, we have quite a few men as well as women on that side. So yes, initially we did face that partnerships or partners, some of them had a bias, not all of them. There were some instances that were like that. On the investor side, I guess, I think with investors, it's a little bit different, because you never know when you get to know whether it's because of, you as a person or your business idea or whatever, right? I think in partnerships, it's a lot more open in the sense that they can always discuss, and it's always a commercial arrangement, or they can stall the meeting or whatever. Whereas I think when it comes to investment, it's a bit tough. And obviously there was no running away from the fact that we were 2 women founders. I think in general, I think the way to think about the investor piece is that ultimately it does boil down to in some inherent biases that people still have. And I think that women are perceived as less of risk takers versus men. And if you really look at what the funding scenario or how women-led businesses have done, and even for example, Nykaa, when she did the IPO and the way she presents her business, it's all about, she has built a business and it's all about what she has built, and she's raising money on the metrics that she has put in and on the strength of the business. Whereas I think with men, there are certainly examples where people are able to raise more money on the promise or the future or the story and the vision. Whereas when it comes to women, it's a lot more about, the here and now and what you have in terms of your proven business model and your, proven metrics. So I think it does boil down to the fact that women are perceived as less of risk takers, maybe. So to pick up on Shinjini's point, the vision aspect and some of the risk-taking ability, entrepreneurship is ultimately about new ideas and risk-taking. And maybe if we as women are perceived as not being good at risk-taking or not being risk takers, we might be good at managing. We are good at running our house and shop, and we are actually seen as prudent, financial managers. But that perception might not be that we are risk takers and we are aggressive, if I may use the word. And so I think in general, then that inherently there is that bias where for women there's a different yardstick that is being used. It might be just a bias. It's not something that is written in any rule book, but that is just a perception. And so if you really see what has happened, I do feel that a lot of the women-led businesses, their metrics tend to be better just because that's what they have to do to actually be able to get to that level of valuation or funding or success or what have you. So I think on the investment side, maybe there are inherent biases that we all should start thinking about. And this image of visionary founder and, aggressive founder, some of it, that is touted in the media as, maverick founder. Which female entrepreneur is called a maverick founder today? No one, right? Whereas, and there was one that was called that and unfortunately didn't go well, right? Whereas there are several male founders who are frequently called maverick, visionary, all of that. So I think those are just biases. I think women in general also don't project themselves like that. So then it's very difficult to separate cause versus actuality or reality, right? Because we also don't project ourselves in that manner. And if we do project ourselves in that manner, then maybe we are perceived completely differently. So I don't know. So I do think that while overall, the ecosystem has changed and there are a lot of positives, but ultimately it is about these inherent biases that can come up both in all three areas, within the team as well. And that is also why certain women, they start to drop out, because there are inherent biases that they themselves feel, or they don't have that much belief in themselves, or there is, family pressure. Then when it comes to partnerships, there is again this inherent, biases that, are these people, worthy of partnering with? And then the third piece is definitely on the investment side, that are these people risk taking enough, or do they have, the ability to fight competition, for example, right? So you will find that in women-led businesses have done well if they are not in a highly competitive space. But if they are in a highly competitive space, then maybe the male-led founders are becoming more successful or getting more funding or what have you. So I do think that it's a bit tough right now to separate the reality versus perception, but these are some of the things that we definitely in hindsight feel that we have experienced. But as ultimately I would say that you just move on, you find ways, right? So to me personally, a lot of times I would not even think of it as an issue, and would just kind of steamroll through things and just move on to the next meeting or the next partnership or the next investor or whatever. So I think ultimately that's kind of how you have to deal with it. And if someone doesn't want to work with you, whether be it a team member, be it an investor, or be it a partner, then so be it.
Wow. There is like from the external perception, there's a lot happening. There are still like lots of areas and good, extremely good points that have come up in today's conversation. But I would like to actually end on the note of action that is happening out here, right? As women entrepreneurs yourselves, as women leaders yourselves, you've seen problems, you've called out these problems. What is the one thing that you are doing, right? Like, which will change this? If we can, like just a one-line kind of summary would be great. We can start anywhere. Maybe we start this time with the youngest, Shruti.
Sure. I think for me, it's about making myself available to people to come and talk to, and to do this to people, who are not from my college, who are not from my background, not from my sector. So my LinkedIn clearly states that I am open to all women reaching out for mentorship. And I also try to go out and try to figure it out. Part of many women networks that we talk about these things, and just putting myself out as, hey, I'm early in my journey, right? So I don't claim I can teach a lot. But whatever I've learned, I'm very happy to share. This is what I've done. This is what works. And I'm happy to problem solve or anything along with that person.
Okay. And so next, Priya, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I feel I don't do enough, to be honest. I've been very, very focused on, building Zest. But off late, yes, trying to be more available, also sharing our story and being part of these, panels and networks. And also beginning to, I guess, look at female-led entrepreneurs and see if we can invest and, do something there. So.
Great. Shinjini.
So I do stretch myself to make time for conversations, because as I keep saying, that putting that flashlight on the issue is important. So I do make time for a lot of that. I make time to be on some boards, which I also think is important. And I'm, how should I put it? Right now, 100% of my attention is on building my Salt app to become something which a lot more women can actually use to become those, what Deena talked about, women that have everything but will still surrender their financial agency. So at this point of time, I think that's 100% of my attention.
And Deena.
Yes, so from my perspective, two things. Through Open, we are two women co-founders, and we also have, we have a 50-50 combination, in fact. But what we are as a team committed also is we do quite a lot of in stories, motivational, bringing into the forefront in terms of the women entrepreneurs. So that is one series that we run, both in terms of, collaborative and series on how to bring their stories and motivate to the front. That is through Open. And second is within also, so entrepreneurship, especially for women, those who have been out of action or out of their whichever kind of mainstream, we bring them back, and that is as a program we run within. And on a personal capacity, also reach out to multiple women entrepreneurs and ensure that I commit some time to mentor them, guide them, and motivate in the right way. It's not like I can teach them rightly, as Shruti also mentioned, right? It is, you can't teach them everything, but at the same time, you can be the rock solid support and a motivation, because it's all about just that one push, one motivation that is required, telling them if there are so many people who have done it, you can also do it. And I also ensure that I share my story, as I mentioned, so that they are not forced to take a break or have a hindrance, and how to manage that. And I feel this is one of the biggest things that is missing when you are speaking to multiple people, because they don't know how to handle when a situation is forced upon your head, or when a situation, the first thing is like, let me be available, than thinking, let me be resourceful and put things together. So that's something I take out time for.
Great. We are actually we are out of time. So today, let's just take a minute to reflect on the many wonderful things that have been said. on the one hand, there is this absolute consciousness of having many more women in entrepreneurial roles, simply because of like the successes that have already been seen and the efficiencies that have been seen. The flip side of it is, are we enough risk takers? Are we actually like enough empowered enough? Do we have enough agency? That's also the conversation which is parallelly happening. So a few things that I am taking away for today, and these are actually, like great thoughts, which I hadn't actually you might have a starting point, perhaps, in terms of funding, etc., and conversations. But what happens as you progress, right? Like, so is there follow-on funding available? Is there constant support which is available? So in that context, you require mentors in the ecosystem, which would be other female founders, which would be other, maybe some of the VC world, maybe some, like women leaders who are in positions as well, right? Like, so that's a great point to have come out. And at the very early stage also to build the supply so that you have enough and, like more and more people seeking this support so that more and more are motivated to come into the fold as such. The second part of it is also the fact that, like you're not stopped, but you're not actively encouraged either, right? Like, and I think that's the second, and how do you deal with that, right? Like, and the stories that need to come out and the light that needs to be shown on these kind of incidences, which actually says that this is normal, this happens. But here are a few ways to deal with it and to reach out to you and to others like you in the, like in this world, the successful people in this world, to kind of help navigate many of these issues. So that those are great takeaways. Thank you so much for actually like joining us for this very interesting discussion. I'm sure we'll have many more of this. And, I'm sure we would see much more action, as I think Deena was mentioning, in the next decade. It's going to be a very different scenario out there and a very different conversation perhaps that we might be having. So I do look forward to that with great optimism as well. Thank you so much for joining us. For the audience, I hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I did, and enjoyed the insightful things that the leaders around this table have actually shared with us, the personal experiences necessarily as well. If you have questions, you could please do write to us at events@flourishventures.com, and we hope we will have many more such interactions, and we will be able to see a change very quickly in the ecosystem. Thank you so much.